On 9th April 2026, SEBI released an informal guidance that actually shook up the entire mutual fund industry in India. If you run an asset management company that also manages AIFs, this video is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Parth from Navigate AIF and we are a legal tech company on a mission to transform complex SEBI regulations into actionable insights. In this video, I will be discussing the informal guidance released by SEBI in response to an application by UTI Alternatives Private Limited and how this impacts each and every asset management company in India that also manages AIFs. Let's dive right in. We will first review the application letter submitted by UTI to SEBI. So this is the informal guidance letter, application letter submitted by them. This has been posted on the SEBI website. What is the background about UTI? So UTI Alternatives Private Limited is a wholly owned subsidiary of UTI Asset Management Company Limited, UTI AMC, that is acting as an AMC to UTI Mutual Fund under SEBI Mutual Fund regulations. Now they are also acting this UAPL, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of UTI AMC, is acting as an investment manager to 3 AIFs. They've detailed them here. And under these AIF funds, UTI has launched 7 schemes, which have also been provided. Additionally, they also operate in GIFT City. So we have some background about UTI and the business activities it does. While operating as an investment manager, FME and co-investment portfolio manager, the applicant has come across several queries with respect to broad-based fund criteria. The entire informal guidance relates to broad-based fund criteria. So let's dive into the question actually. They've referred to Regulation 24B of the SEBI Mutual Fund Regulations 1996. So key point to note is that the mutual fund regulations have been updated in 2026, the year that I'm making this video. So this regulation has now become Regulation 21. And what does the regulation say? Well, the regulation says that the AMC is permitted to undertake the following business activities either itself or through its subsidiary, subject to complying with certain conditions. First is that management and advisory services provided to pooled assets. Actually, let me show you the actual regulations. This will make it much simpler to understand what this says. So we can see Regulation 21 here. These are the latest regulations, the updated regulations. We can see under Regulation 21B, it says the AMC, Asset Management Company, shall not undertake any business activities other than in the nature of management and advisory services to pooled assets, including offshore funds, insurance funds, pension funds, provident funds, or such categories of FPI investors subject to such conditions as may be specified by the board from time to time, if such activities are not in conflict with the activities of the mutual fund. So they cannot undertake any business activities other than in the nature of management and advisory services to pooled assets. Asset management companies to provide management and advisory services to pooled assets, including offshore funds, pension funds, provident funds, etc. Importantly, we can note here that alternative investment funds have not been provided in the list, and that is a question that has been asked in this informal guidance as well. Another important thing to look at here is a proviso of this regulation which says that provided further, the asset management company may itself or through its subsidiaries undertake portfolio management services and advisory services for other than broad-based fund till further directions that may be specified by the board. So it's again saying that the asset management company may itself or through its subsidiary undertake PMS and advisory services, but other than for broad-based fund. So doesn't include broad-based fund here till further directions are specified by the board. So what are they asking again? They refer to both of these regulations and they said that it's pertinent to note that the said regulation does not specifically provide the requirement of broad-based fund with respect to management services provided to pooled assets, and no definition of pooled assets is also provided in the regulation. And then they've given the explanation to Regulation 24, which states that for the purpose of the regulation, broad-based fund means and a fund which has at least 20 investors and no single investor accounts for more than 25% of the corpus of the fund. So this is still the definition of broad-based fund under the new regulations as well. So at least 20 investors and no single investor should hold more than 25% of the corpus of the fund. This is important to note. Now, what they're asking is, pursuant to this master circular, the broad-based fund criteria is also met if management service has been provided by the AMC itself or through its subsidiary, because UAPL is a wholly owned subsidiary of the AMC, to appropriately regulate FPIs wherein 50% of their shares or units being held by appropriately regulated entities such as pension funds, insurance or reinsurance entities, banks and mutual funds on a look-through basis. So if this management service has been provided by the AMC or subsidiary to these regulated entities as well. They've also referred to the AIF regulation to define, to look at the definition of AIF and call it a privately pooled investment vehicle. Now, we need to look at what their key queries are. So first key query was that Regulation 24B does not specifically provide the requirement of broad-based fund with respect to management services to pooled assets. Please clarify whether the requirement of broad-based fund is required for to be complied with for the management services to pooled assets, that is AIFs and schemes managed by UAPL. If the answer is yes, that if SEBI does say that broad-based fund criteria has to be met for providing management and advisory services to pooled assets, then they wanted to know that as per the joint and harmonious reading, compliance testing to the broad-based fund criteria should be conducted at the fund level and not at individual scheme level. Please confirm my interpretation of the same. Then AIF regulations allow a fund of fund structure. So that is, scheme of the AIF may invest into another scheme of an AIF. In such master feeder structures, please confirm whether it's adequate for the master fund to be broad-based or whether each feeder fund, which could be SEBI registered AIF or gift fund, could even be offshore funds actually, need not be broad-based fund. This is because feeder funds do not do standalone investments, and active management is undertaken at the master fund level. And last, it's saying in the context of compliance with broad-based fund criteria, by reckoning against investments made by appropriately regulated entities, do the regulated entities need to be foreign residents or can appropriately regulate domestic entities such as banks, insurance companies and provident fund trusts also be considered, and they cannot discern any reason to discriminate between domestic and foreign regulated entities. Now, at first glance, this may look very confusing on why are they asking this question about whether broad-based fund criteria has to be met for management services to pooled assets. Like, this was never written in the regulations. Well, there is a reason, and the reason comes from this consultation paper which was released by SEBI. This consultation paper is released on the regulatory framework on permissible business activities for AMCs under Regulation 24 of the Mutual Fund Regulations. Here actually, the background actually talks about how this regulation 24, restricts AMCs from undertaking any business activities other than management and advice services to pooled assets. And going ahead, it also says that it gives a background on why this regulation was introduced, and the term pooled assets was essentially broad-based was introduced under Regulation 24B, and it was provided there should be no conflict of interest due to differential fee structure charged by AMC. And additionally, Regulation 24B restricts the AMC through itself or through its subsidiary to undertake certain activities such as providing services to non-broad-based fund. However, service can be provided through PMS license. So this consultation paper actually caused some confusion because clauses of this consultation paper hinted towards what has actually been clarified by SEBI in this informal guidance. And it is said that it is also said in this consultation paper, it was decided to review and consider relaxing the broad-basing requirement and permitting AMCs to serve pooled non-broad-based funds, as well as subject to strong governance and regulatory controls that would address any concerns relating to conflict of interest situations. So this consultation paper also you can read alongside reviewing the informal guidance. This will give you more context into the background of the regulator and how they came across this consultation paper, how they finally gave this informal guidance. Let's jump into the informal guidance to understand what exactly it says. So informal guidance is dated 9th April 2026, where they've again given the background and they've listed the queries down, which we've just read in the applicant letter. Now, what are SEBI's responses to the queries? So query 1, response to query 1 is that Regulation 21B and which was also filed Regulation 24B provides that AMC shall not undertake business activity other than management and advice services to pooled assets. So repeating the law first. Also providing broad-based fund criteria, determining what is broad-based fund as has been defined under the mutual fund regulations. That is fund which has at least 20 investors and no single investor holds more than 25%. Next, it has defined the definition of AIF under the AIF regulations and what it actually means. And SEBI has said that considering that AIF is a pooled asset in terms of the definition in AIF regulation, the broad-based requirement as indicated in paragraph 3.1.2 above, which is the broad-based requirement under the mutual fund regulations, shall be applicable to management and advisory services rendered by AMCs or their subsidiaries to AIFs and their schemes. So now if an AMC or its subsidiary is providing management or advisory services to AIFs, then that AIF has to meet the broad-based fund requirements. So the AIF should basically have more than 20 investors, and no single investor should be more than 25% of the corpus of the fund. That has been clarified here by SEBI. In response to query 2, which was that if the broad-based requirement does apply, what next? So SEBI is saying that Regulation 10 of the AIF considers each scheme as a distinct investment vehicle for the purpose of investor limits, corpus requirements, and compliance obligations. Accordingly, for the purpose of Regulation 21B of the SEBI mutual fund regulations, the broad-based requirement shall be assessed at the scheme level. So each scheme of the AIF has to be broad-based and not the fund, as it reflects the actual investor composition of the pooled vehicle to which management or advisory services are rendered by the AMC or its subsidiaries. Next, for query 3, it is saying that Regulation 15 of the AIF regulation provides a subject to authorization. AIF is authorized to invest in units of another AIF. Now, each scheme of the AIF is treated as a distinct investment vehicle. Accordingly, notwithstanding that feeder funds may not undertake independent investment decision, each fund, whether master or feeder, so at both levels, whether you are at the master level or at the feeder level, each fund to which management or advisory services are rendered by the AMC or its subsidiary is required to independently comply with the broad-based requirement specified under the mutual fund regulation. So if the AMC or its subsidiary are providing management or advisory services, then each scheme, whether it's master or feeder, both have to comply with the broad-based fund requirements. And lastly, with respect to whether the criteria for FPIs, appropriately regulated FPIs, would also apply to banks, it's saying that Regulation 21B permits AMCs to provide management or advisory services to specified categories of FPIs. Now, the Master Circular for Mutual Funds actually specifies the categories of FPIs to which AMCs may provide management and advisory services. Domestic regulated entities such as Indian banks, insurance companies, or provident fund trusts are governed by separate domestic regulatory frameworks and do not fall within the scope of FPI framework. Hence, the domestic regulated entities do not qualify for the exemption under the Master Circular for Mutual Funds. So you cannot give them the same exemption that is there for appropriately regulated FPIs under the Master Circular for Mutual Funds, and we would have to treat them separately. So the important takeaway from this video is that for asset management companies that are managing mutual funds and also managing AIFs or even managing AIFs with the subsidiaries, each and every scheme of the AIF or a feeder fund of the AIF, all of them have to comply with the broad-based fund requirements. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and do let me know if you have any other questions or queries. Thank you.